Hello, darling. Thank you so much for your patience with me and getting this reading to you. It's been a combination of factors, to be honest. I'm pregnant and being in school and med school, nonetheless, and pregnant has taken more of a toll on me than I expected. Um, and also, I had another reading, yours and another person, that I've been trying to sit down and do for the last 2 weeks. And every time it was like, nope, not time, not time. I really felt like I was forcing it. And I don't like that feeling when I'm doing readings, because then I know it's me speaking and no one else. And that's not really the point. So, I checked in just a little bit ago. I saw your name on Instagram, um, and it was like all systems go. And so even to the point where I was like, I don't even know if I need to read their letter. But I want to do that. I would do a disservice not including what they've shared with me. And it does, it will, I think, make the reading much richer, and just knowing where your heart is and what's happening and the events surrounding you right now. First thing, though, I want to share is a little bit of a history of our connection, yours and mine, that I'm confident you're not aware of, because it's been very personal and private to me. I had a miscarriage at the end of 2020, and into the new year last year. I was still grieving that and really questioning it, because I felt confident my partner and I are meant to be parents, and we're both old. He's 41. I will be 39 in June this year. So, there was just really a fear that it wouldn't come back again. And so, somewhere though at the beginning of the year, the 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 name Jasper caught my eye, and I was looking at crystals, and there was one named Ocean Jasper, and I just thought that was such a cool name. And but Jasper is what stuck, and I started buying up a bunch of Jasper. I actually have one sitting here with us today. I just love this piece. I think it's so beautiful. This might be Ocean Jasper, actually. Um, I started putting it everywhere, and I just really believed, well, I had a feeling, I should say, this was going to be the name of our baby, the next baby. And somewhere along those lines, I got connected with a fundraiser out of the UK, which, a little unusual just because I'm in Seattle, Washington in the US. And I love those fundraisers, and but it being overseas was different. And I found this beautiful piece, and uh, it struck me because the artist's name was Jasper, and I'd been on a few months of this journey of chasing Jasper, and so when I went to your profile, it felt like a wave of familiarity in a way. It still brings tears to my eyes. Like, I still don't. I felt like I was looking at my future, because my partner and I had already determined that we were not going to gender our baby, and that we wanted to raise them fairly in a non-binary scenario, and I'm a fairly creative person, and so is my partner, and so just like seeing this person as an artist and non-binary and all these beautiful things, I can't even tell you how it impacted me in that moment, and that was you. And so we are pregnant again and planning to name the baby Jasper, and we use that name quite frequently. So I just wanted to let you know I'm not going to pretend to know what or why, but we have a connection, and I appreciate it. I wanted to speak a little bit to your I've been meditating over the space, and I like to do smoke clearing, and then clearing the cards. I just got this new deck actually the other day. Um, I have a feeling the artist in you is really gonna enjoy it. Um, the artist of the deck actually, like in their bio, it says that they designed illustrations for like Korean magazines or something, and I was like, ooh, cool. Um, uh, I hear all the confusion, and I can definitely see where you're coming from. Um, it is I empathize because it's also hard for me to be dependent on people, and although very different, this pregnancy has really forced me to um, give up a lot of my control of the world around me. And having a human in my body as a trauma survivor is as an added it's an added it's an added obstacle, to be honest. Knowing I have no control over my body, and I worked so hard to maintain that control and regain that control. And I'm so sorry to hear that your dad didn't reach out to you. I I feel that hard too. Um, so there's a lot I could respond to, but I will just say my heart is very heavy for you, and I can understand why you're struggling with this decision. Um, you have you have such a good pros and cons list on both sides from what you've shared in your email. Um, so I think that we'll just get some cards going, and let me grab. I have something that I have a. I'm not a good tarot reader, and that I don't memorize everything. I move a lot on instinct and and inspiration. And one of the things I don't memorize is the spread and what it all means. So let me grab. I have an image I like to refer to. Um, okay. So while I'm looking for this, what I will say is that um, I usually recommend that folks have uh, a piece of paper or a journal handy. Um, and, you can make use of the pause button, and you can stop this at any point. So what I usually suggest is, like, when something really impacts you, when it resonates with you, um, write down what comes to mind. And it can be, it's unique for every person, which I find really beautiful. But it can be an image, it can be song lyrics, it can be, a scene from a movie. You might hear me referencing some of those, and I apologize. It may not translate culturally, but the nice thing is you may have access to those things, and you can go find what I'm talking about. Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding this image. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Yeah. So the other thing is too, like, if something falls flat for you, don't worry about it. It's not, that means it's really not for you at this moment. And you might rewatch this in 6 months and find out that thing is for you now. It's so hard to say, but also the other thing is, when you are writing things down that strike you, don't worry about getting word for word what I'm saying. I operate under the idea that I am a vessel, and I invite your higher like powers, whatever that may be, like spirit guides, ancestors, you name it, any spirit entity that's in a loving relationship with you. So in other words, they're on your side, they're in your corner, and I invite them to come and be a part of this process. And so I feel like I'm the entity that translates the message. but my words are not perfect because I am a human. So um, just let it be. If something's, if the way you translate it is different, just let it be. It's okay. Okay. So, okay. Um, so we are working with the Dreaming Way Tarot. Um, Again, there's these images just really strike me. Um, and I am going to be working with the Celtic Cross spread. The nice thing is these are all um, these are all labeled with either their major arcana designation or their minor arcana designation. And so you can always pause. And if you need some more clarity, like if you find that the reading isn't bringing enough, or you're just curious, you can always take these cards and go look them up online. There's a reader out of Australia named Biddy. Biddy Tarot is her website. But here's a nice snapshot of your spread. If you want to press pause and do a screenshot there. But she has essentially like a library of all the meanings, and it can be really overwhelming because there's a lot in each of those cards. But what I usually suggest is kind of like with the reading, like see what stands out to you and jot those down. And if they fall flat, then just move along. There's no point in wasting your time. Okay, so um, so um, the issue of moving is really, I think, what's kind of at the forefront. I know you said you weren't sure about that, but I think the issue of moving is so central to several things that are happening for you. Um, like being forced to think about moving is like really forcing you to think about your community. It's forcing you to evaluate how you allow yourself to be cared for, and who does that caring. It's forcing you to evaluate like how you make decisions and how that might be unique from the people around you. And I think ultimately it's forcing you to evaluate, where do you want to be based, without anyone else's influence, um, without the pressure of your illness, without the forces that surround you. Like, where do you want to be in the end? And I hear you, like, that you might be giving up an opportunity to move. And I just want to say, like, usually the first time we're presented with an opportunity, it is not our last. And often, I mean, I'm not going to generalize because I don't have that data, but the first time isn't necessarily the right time. Sometimes it's just the impetus to get you thinking about your values, like ultimately what's most important to you. So, if I would just encourage you uh, to not overwhelm yourself with the stress of this particular move, but really let yourself sit with all that's coming up around it, and whether or not moving is even something that is important to you or something that you want to do. And don't get me wrong, I understand like the financial piece of that. My partner and I live in a very expensive city, and I've never paid so much to live like in my life. And he's an educator and I'm in med school, so neither of us really has the money to keep up with that lifestyle. So I get it, but I also would not want to live here anyway, regardless of all of that. For me, the cost just exacerbates the systemic problems that exist here, that make it really impossible for us to thrive, and many, many, many people to thrive. So anyway, I was, on that note though, like on talking about moving and things, when I was in my early 20s, I was living in Indiana, which is about 3,000 miles kind of on the opposite end of the country, what you're considering. Um, and I was dating this guy and I was really stuck in my life. And he was like, "You should move." And I just was like, "Sure." I mean, it was literally one phone call conversation that I went from being resistant to moving to making a plan to moving to Arizona, which, like, I just knew so little of myself at the time that living in the desert, I didn't realize would never be compatible with me. Um, I mean, I live in the what we call the Pacific Northwest now, and it's very rainy and wet all year round. And even though the gloom gets to me, I much prefer that to baking in the hot sun, like for 9 months of the year. So I moved back very quickly, like within 4 or 5 months, um, and when I thought about moving again, there was a lot of hesitance because I had thought that that move had failed. And I think what I realize is that move, like, considering if I had sat with it, which I was an impulsive 20, I think I was 23, very impulsive, not going to sit with those questions. But if I had, I might have reconsidered the trajectory of my life and I might have, set a different course. And instead, I came back and licked my wounds for a long, long time, and then committed to being in Indiana for a period of time. And so when it came time to move to the Pacific Northwest, it was a much harder decision for me, and I had to overcome a lot of my fears from the first move. So acting on the first opportunity isn't always the best idea. I'm not saying you shouldn't act on this. I'm just saying it's okay to sit with the questions. Okay, that's enough of my preaching. Sometimes I just get on a roll. Okay, so the first card we want to chat about here is it's the card that's in the position of your current state. So we have the Page of Wands here. And it's interesting. This is by the water. You mentioned that your current location is near the water. Personally, that would be enough for me to never move away ever. I have to be by the water too. Um, but you think about like a page. Um, so pages are in the system of things. They are the newbies, right? They've submitted themselves essentially um, for apprenticeship. Like they're learning a new trade, something very new to them. And wands is spiritual in nature, so it's all the ethereal. And I think what's fascinating is her face. Um, there's almost like there's this kind of this sense of like she's looking over her shoulder, like and I'm gendering her. That's probably not fair. This person, I'll use they, them from here on out. But they're looking over their shoulder like, okay, yeah, I'm starting in on this new journey, but I don't quite trust it. Like there's just this air of suspicion. Um, and hmm. And so the feeling I get here is um there's a naivety here, and almost like uh um it's not a it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like when you have a young person who's just like naive to the world, but there's something really attractive about that. Like you want to protect that naivety. This is like there's a feeling of almost like a naivety that is bringing about that's harboring fear. Like uh I think about the feelings I had like walking into social settings in high school when I was very like I was very socially, I was like the youngest in my class, and I was also traumatized. So um, I was very socially unaware. I had a very puristic, like meant like mentality that people just meant to do good. And I can remember like walking around and through conversations that people were having that I knew were like really sadistic or harmful, or even just like making fun of me or other people. And I remember having this feeling of like, my ignorance is harming me at this moment, um, because I'm naive to these things. And it's, I feel like I'm being made a fool of. So anyway, that's just the kind of the sense that I get, that there's like, this is not a welcome place for this person. Their naivety feels like it's harming them in some way. So recent past is the Ace of Swords. I find it fascinating. This is literally just a sword. There's like not even a human involved in this picture. Um, but most recent past, Ace of Swords. So swords are really like communication, um, words exchange, like that kind of thing. Um, and they are, um, I think the ace is like the beginning. So it's like, honestly, I kind of see this as like your communication break with this person and those feelings of betrayal, um, that you've mentioned, and how that's like thrust you into this place of feeling like, almost like, was I a fool to think, was I a fool to believe the things this person was saying? Is that my own naivety? Is that my own ignorance? Like, am I really not as awake to the world as I should be? Um, and then in the near future is the Four of Swords. So um, I think you're really just going through this intense time of unwrapping, like unwrapping the layers of this situation. Um, and it's interesting because there's a card that crosses over the three of these, it lays over them. We call it either the bridge or the barrier. Um, this spread I'm looking at says what helps, what hinders. And it's an Eight of Swords, and she's literally blindfold, like, and still that kind of that motion of looking over her shoulder, like, um, an air of distrust here. Um, and I would say like this is a hindrance for sure, because it's, I think a lot of what's keeping you from moving forward in this is really all of your thoughts and feelings about yourself. You know, the questioning and the suspicion and the night, like wondering if the naivety is like something that's harming you, is you doubting your own experiences in this scenario. And honestly, like, it's like this person that's blindfolded, um I think it's all those feelings that you have that are judging you are really blinding you from being able to move forward and see the truth. And um yeah, I don't have much more about to say about that specifically. Let's just keep seeing what these cards are unveiling. Okay. Um hmm. So the goals and ideals, in that position is the Knight of Swords. And I kind of chuckled because, um, apart, really, at least in comparison to the other three swords that we've seen thus far, this is a person who's very much in control, right? They're on their horse, they're able to move forward at will. They have their sword ready. And there's this kind of feeling of like, I will move forward at any cost, bitches. Um, and so I'm not at all surprised that's in the goals and ideals section because, like, I understand that desire for independence. Like, when you do have to depend on the people around you, and then you find that that's not as dependable as you wanted or as it was shared with you, there is this like there's almost this like internal need to like mount up and push through and cut, use that sword to cut through all of the fog, all of the things that are bothering you so that you can come through on like I just imagine this night in a foggy forest, and it's like, fuck this. I'm going to figure out how to use my sword, symbolically how to use my words to cut through all of this fog, and I'm going to come out on the other side. It's going to be shining and sunny, and I'm going to just know the answer for myself. Um, and, unfortunately, unfortunately, um, while that seems really appealing, it's not always the right way, because what did the knight learn through that fog? The fog is where the questions come up. The fog is where we sit with the things that that the situation is bringing up for us, right? It's not really ever the situation, it's what's coming up. How do you, how to say this? So if you had none of those variables to contend with, and you didn't have like the shame, and if you were if you were a little ways down the way on your healing journey, and those things weren't really things that affected you so strongly, I think your decision making process wouldn't be so challenging. So it's not the decision itself. And I don't mean that to say there's anything wrong with you, because there's not. Like, we are all on this continuum of a healing journey. And as we heal, we see things differently. We are more clear headed. The thing is, we think it's our words and just having the right thing to say that's going to cut that fog, that's going to clear the skies for us. But it's actually going internally and healing all these parts of ourselves that are being triggered by the situation that we're in. That's actually what clears the fog. And, it's, yeah, okay. So, subconscious influences on this situation. We have the Page of Cups. And there's just such a tenderness to this person. So cups are symbolic of emotions. And what's interesting is this person appears to be underwater. I don't know, unless the fish are flying. But those are definitely fish. So and then a page, right, like we talked about with the Page of Wands, like kind of being at the beginning of learning this journey of how to navigate emotions. And I just want to say, like, the cards are affirming that your emotions are heavy right now. Like, you're almost like underwater. I mean, this poor little person's face, she's about to start crying. Like, she's doing her best to hold things together, but the reality is, like, they are underwater with the emotional aspect of what's happening. So that's not when these things get shared, that's not a finger in the wound, okay? That's an invitation to address that part of yourself so that it can be nurtured and loved. Emotions are not bad. Like, having an emotional response to something, it means that you were invested. It means that you cared. It means that you cared a lot. And I think one of the hardest things for those of us who've had any kind of trauma in our family history is really developing that we can have family again in a different form. And so you've had this scenario where you were essentially promised family. Now that family is moving. And what, like, that's bringing up so many layers of things because they didn't consult you, and they're moving to a place you don't know that you even want to be in, and they're uprooting, that would uproot you from your community. And all that to say, just like, your emotional body is hurting right now, being faced with all these questions. So it's okay to spend some time like holding that part of yourself, nurturing that part of yourself. I don't know what you have that connects you like to your little inner child person, that little person inside of you that was harmed and abandoned and, left to fend for themselves. But connect with that. Like, find a physical item that you can connect to. Here's why I say this. So I have a monkey, a little tiny monkey from when I was 2. Somehow I still kept this thing. I have no idea how it's gotten this far. I'm going to be very honest. Um, but poor little thing, it used to have like fluffy hair. And now it's all matted and pilly, like little blobs of, anyway. um it's definitely seen better days. But when my trauma started coming up for me, when the memories started coming up for me, my monkey became the connection I had to that little person in me who was harmed. And I could hold the monkey even when I couldn't yet hold myself. I could hold the monkey with tenderness and compassion, and I could comfort the monkey. And even still, monkey, I mean, that's been almost 5 years that I've been really working through that, really consistently working through that. And I've learned how to hold myself internally and listen to her better. But I still find that monkey speaks for her. Like, I can't, um, she will say things like to me and to my partner, like, I had a bad day. I'm like, oh, honey, what, and it's like something I wouldn't have even thought to ask my inner child self about. And she comes up with all these concerns that she has. And then I can address them and I can nurture them. So I'm curious if there's something like that for you right now in this like really intense time of hurting, if you can find something that connects you with your little self, and something that allows you to both sit with them and comfort them at the same time. The hardest part of reparenting is being able to hear the hurt and pain that your inner child is sharing with you, and then to respond to them by saying, I hear you, and I'm not going to let that happen to you again. Like, it is hard because you're trying to make a promise to them that wasn't guaranteed to you. That's something that's been coming up for me with being pregnant. Is like, um the world is a crazy shit show. And I was talking to little Jasper um one day, and I was like, I really don't know about this world that you're coming into. um I'm sorry. I have a feeling it's going to be really hard and challenging, but I just want you to know I will never leave you hanging. And then I started crying because I realized that was a promise that I am committed to upholding for another being that was never committed to for me when I was young and vulnerable. So there's a lot of emotion around reparenting ourselves, but it's so critical because a friend of mine gave me this analogy recently. Like, our little selves that have been harmed, they learned really early on that they needed to take the wheel and drive, because if they didn't, the harmful people would. Well, that is a good survival instinct for little people, But little people get older. And the reality is, you can't have a 4 or 5 or 6 year old driving a car. They don't know how. Like, they may be able to hit the gas and get you out of danger, like in the immediate moment, but they definitely don't know how to steer you in any direction that's helpful to you. So, another big reason that we talk about reparenting is that um, you need to replace that child part of yourself in the driver's seat. You, the Jasper you are, is a grown adult person, and the Jasper they are is not. They are little, they are immature, they are underdeveloped, they are hurting. And hurting little people make really rash, crazy decisions. So I think that's a big part of the story here, is really tending to little Jasper's needs and wants right now, and letting that help clear the fog for you, because as you get to know them, you get to know yourself, right? And getting to know yourself, you're going to be able to figure out what you truly value and where you truly want to be. You know, uprooting yourself out of, like, you mentioned having a fresh start. And there's some validity to that. Don't get me wrong. I had to move across the country to feel safe enough to start confronting my trauma. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I needed to get out. But once I was away, the trauma started surfacing, and I was like, wow, I have been suppressing this for 30-ish years because I was truly not safe in my environment. So there's merit to that, but you know what still came with me was all my trauma. And the hardest part was then I was not surrounded by any kind of community. And um and I had to kind of forge that in the process of healing my trauma. So there's merit to wanting a fresh start, but I will also just say, like, you have to be aware that all the things, all of the issues that are coming up for you right now will follow you there. Like, if they're not attended to, if they're not, embraced and cared for. So, something to keep in mind. Okay, let's keep going. All right. Okay, so this is an encouraging one. The next card is your approach to the situation, and we have the eight in the major arcana, which is strength. And I always love this card because it usually has like lion energy in it. And so the encouraging piece here to me is that, one, also look at this outfit. How stunningly fun is this outfit? So what I mean by the art, man, it's just so, I fucking love her. Them. They also have like a little infinity sign above their head. I don't know if you can see that, but to me, what this is saying is you have the strength to face all of this. Even when you feel like you're weak and beaten down and exhausted, actually the underlying force is strength. We think strength is like, okay, so here's the thing. We think this is strength, right? You're on your horse and you've got your sword and you can cut down anyone and anything in your way. This is strength. Being able to walk with the power is the strength. Like, this person has their hand on a lion is not afraid. That's strength. Another thing that's really encouraging to me is the environment that you're in is showing the 11 in the major arcana, which is justice. So here's something that's really fascinating to me. My dryer. We'll get into why that's encouraging to me. But the thing I want to point out here is that in tarot, we have the major arcana and then we have the minor arcana. And the minor arcana is everything we've been looking at so far. It's a number with a class, like swords, cups, wands, whatever. And it's not that those messages are not important, but they're temporary. Like they're more fleeting. Whereas the major arcana, which is like a number like 8, and then a word, strength, justice, etc. Those tend to pack more of a punch. They tend to be cards and messages that are more stable, less temporary, less fleeting, um, not, I wouldn't say permanent, but long lasting. Like, um, so, and they're usually an evolution of the minor arcana. So, one example is like the two of, I think it's the two of cups, is like these two lovers and they're embracing and whatever, and it's meant to like symbolize like this balance of love. The lovers card is like the evolution of that. It's like the more, um oh, I hope this is making sense. It's like the evolved version, maybe I could say that. And so what's encouraging to me here is that you're going through a lot of layers right now, and a lot of changes and a lot of adjustments. And like, I understand that that has got to feel super confusing to you, and just like, I think you mentioned like you're really just like clouded by all your guilt and shame, and you don't, like, I get that. The beauty is they're all minor arcana cards. They're all temporary, they're all fleeting, they're all affected by your decision making. Your approach and your environment, two things that are really important, are stable as fuck. Like, you can lean into them, okay? Your approach of wanting to share your story with basically a stranger that you met on the internet and get their feedback through a tarot reading, your approach to thinking about all the layers that are coming up for you, your approach to addressing, you know, these emotional pieces of yourself, to confronting how being dependent on people makes you feel in the bigger scheme of things. Like, your approach is solid. You don't need to question it. Even when everything around you, or even when what's getting stirred up feels like madness, feels like chaos, your approach is strength. It is strong. It is a place of strength for you. You don't need to to you might question everything else. You don't need to question your approach. Okay? Your environment is one full of justice. Now, that can be the environment of your house, that can be the environment of the community you've created, um, all of the above, okay? Justice is balance. Justice is, oh, this person, interesting. Ha, interesting. Justice is blind and also holding a sword. We've seen cards very similar to that so far, huh? Um, what is keeps coming up for me in this is your community is one that can be trusted. So, and they're not going to judge. Like, they're more interested in seeing the right outcome than they are about judging the people and in their process. So, I'm curious if there are people that you can turn to help you talk these things out, you know, and someone who can really hear and hold the the pain and the anguish that you feel around not being able to fully care for yourself independently, the pain and the betrayal you feel around this person making a decision without your consultation. Like, not everyone can do that, right? Like, some people are going to be really they're going to burn for you. Like, they're going to feel the fire for and with you. And while it's really good to be affirmed in that, sometimes it's usually not helpful for figuring out how to navigate. Like, I'm assuming that you still want to have a relationship with this person who's moving away, even if they move away and you don't. So you want to be able to confide in someone who can hold all that space, right? Like who can say, um, like, wow, I can really see how that hurts for you. I can really see and affirm why you feel that way without demonizing the other person, right? Like who can, and I think like my gut says you know who these people are already. You just need to reach out and trust that they're going to support you. And you can very if you get in if you test the waters with one of these people and they do kind of take that like demonizing approach, you can just say, I really appreciate that you support me. I can tell that you love me because of how fierce your response is. I don't think we should talk about this anymore though, because I'm not quite looking for that perspective right now. You don't have to keep going. You don't have to indulge. Um, and I think it's important for people to realize too when they're like unbiased. I mean, I have several friends who are going through relationship struggles and breakups at the moment, and I am not unbiased. I will I don't think they're well, in one scenario, I will say I don't think their partner is a terrible person. I just think they're unmatched. They're not well matched, and and this person is making them pay for that, like making them feel terrible about themselves. So I'm not okay with that. Like I'm not okay with them doing that. I still don't think they're a terrible person. So I can hold a little bit more unbiased space for them, but the other couple I just can't. I'm like, this is bullshit. That person's manipulative. You should leave them. um, but if you can have someone who really helps you navigate your feelings around things, not just the circumstances, I think that can be really helpful for you. The cards say your environment is really ripe for that scenario. So lean into it, right? Your approach is not wrong. Your approach is one of strength. So lean into it and see what happens. What you need to know is our next card. And it's the Nine of Cups. I think what's interesting is the only other cups we had was with our poor little friend underwater. And I think it's important. I think what this card is saying is that it's important for you to remember that you don't have to be underwater with your emotions. Like, this person is sitting rather stylishly, I might add, on the land. The water is behind them and it's very much a part of their landscape. But it's not dominating their existence, right? Like it's not even close enough for them to feel threatened by it. So, it's okay. It's okay to, how to say this, facing and addressing your feelings and nurturing them is actually what gets you here. It gets you back onto dry land. It gets you back to a place where you don't feel so overwhelmed. I think we think like, we judge our emotions so harshly, right? Like we tell our emotions that they're not valid, or that if they would just get out of our way, we could see clearly. But the reality is our emotions need attention. They need to be nurtured. They need to be faced and loved. If you think about times when you just really wanted validation and someone gave it to you, right? How that relieves so much of the pressure. And emotions are similarly, like when they get validated and affirmed, even just saying, wow, I can really understand why you feel hurt and betrayed by this situation. Oh my gosh, like imagine saying that to yourself. Like I actually encourage you to press pause and say that to yourself and see what your bodily response is. Like, because it's very relieving to have something affirmed instead of judged, like when we judge it, it's like putting an air tube in an inflatable beach toy, and when you judge it, you're like pressing the inflation, and it's just like, not the best example, because you do want the beach toy to be inflated usually, but like just that feeling that like you're making something grow bigger, versus when you turn around and you affirm something, you're actually like allowing it to have its proper place. And I think this is in the what you need to know category, because it's this reminder that your emotions really are central to this whole storyline. And what the emotions that are coming up are letting you know that they need to be tended to. Okay. And the final outcome is it's all emotional. You have the King of Cups here. And I see this as like the ability. I mean, this king he has like, first of all, there's a look of contentment on their face, like a look of peace, which we did not see in our other two cups. We have this poor little thing who's like forcing a smile but is about to cry. And then the next one we just looked at, they're more on top of their emotions, but they look considerably dismayed to me. Like they still don't feel like they are successful. Whereas you have the King of Cups, he's like, they have this, like, they're on their little throne. They're navigating the waters. They're not overcome by it. They're able to essentially be master of their emotions. And that's not this. That's not this kind of mastering. It's not forceful mastering. It's peaceful mastering. And there's a difference. That's a very different relationship. Being able to peacefully navigate something that once overcame you versus just striking it down because it's in your way. Okay, I'm getting the sense that I should draw a couple more cards, which I did have at the beginning, but so when I was drawing them, I was just kind of, there was a thought that came through that was like, we need to draw some cards on the move itself. So we have the King of Swords, and we have the Page of Swords. And I don't get the sense from these cards that it would be a good move for you. Both of these cards are very cold. They're very guarded. They're quite the opposite, even in, I mean, look how just vibrant this card is. There's such a vibrancy here. There is such a cold, dark winterness here. And my impression is that swords also correspond with intellect. It's like communication and intellect. It's all kind of that like heady stuff. If you were to just decide to go, I have a feeling you would be neglecting the real work that is ahead of you, which is to reconcile yourself with your feelings and to really allow them the space. Allow yourself the space to heal some of these really deep, deep places in yourself. There's a sense here that to move would equal isolation. and would be and isolation from yourself and from the world around you. And it would be the opposite direction of where you're going with this outcome, with this King of Cups. It's like you have an invitation to evolve. This person deciding to do something drastic that changes your world without your consideration is not a personal attack on you. It's meant to evoke these layers so that you can begin facing them. And if you accept the invitation to face them, to love them, to nourish them and nurture them, the outcome is positive. No matter what you decide, like no matter what the physical like decision-making process is, if that makes sense. Like this is such an inner job. Whereas if you push down those feelings, if you judge those feelings, if you allow those feelings to continue to cloud you, and you move out of fear, or you move out of desperation, or you move out of a desire to keep a connection going that may or may not be serving you, it leads to this cold, isolated, distant outcome. So that's, I think the beauty of working with tarot is like, this is all fluid. Like this is not an answer that's set in stone. This is like a temperature gauge of where things are right now. And you have options, but options have consequences. So obviously, facing and dealing with the emotional component of this has consequences too. It's going to be really fucking hard. There's going to be a lot of tears, and there's going to be a lot of feeling like, why am I digging through this? Why am I surfacing all of these things? Like I put them away for a reason. But that's the point, is you put them away for a reason that no longer serves you. It's a reason that doesn't exist anymore. So when you keep shoving it back down, then you're doing it almost for nothing at this point, except more harm. So, yeah, this was very meaty. I want to say that I empathize with you in the journey that you're on. And in doing that, I don't want to equate my scenarios with yours, but just to let you know that you're not alone. And you're truly not alone. Like, even though the thing about grief is it is incredibly lonely. And there are things you grieve that no one else is grieving because no one else has lived your exact life. But that doesn't mean you're alone in grief, the generality of grief, right? It doesn't mean you're alone in feeling some of these things that are very human and that are very, that are especially common threads in people who have been neglected or abandoned or traumatized in any way in their childhood. You have added layers of chronic illness and your identity and your things that they shouldn't, but tend to put people on the fringes of things. You have a lot of intersections around that are hard to navigate. And But you're not alone in that, you know? You're truly not alone. So, please feel free to reach out if you have any like clarifying questions or concerns. I love feedback, but I don't require it and I won't ask it of you because I think feedback is really hard to form especially when you're knee deep in processing so many other things. But I will say, usually when I don't often remember the specifics of readings, so you might ask a clarifying question, or you might say, well, you said this, this, and this, and it may not register with me at all. So in those moments, I will tell you and encourage you to take your questions into meditation and ask those that guide you what you should take away from those, like for those questions as an answer. And the most challenging piece of that is trusting that the answer you get is an answer. We oftentimes dismiss it as like, oh, well, that's just my imagination, or that's just me answering. Yes, and it could be a guided answer. So don't be so quick to dismiss what comes up. But definitely write down your questions, and even write down things that frustrated you or irritated you. The page is open to you. And thank you so much for trusting me with this information, and for trusting me with sharing this reading with you. Please keep in touch. Let me know how things develop. I'm curious to hear, and I will be thinking about you. Take care.